Hello, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are joining us in the world, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm so glad that you took the time out to join us today. My name is Awais Chowdhury, and I'll be your moderator for this morning's discussion. Now, joining our discussion today, we are joined by Legit Security CTO and co-founder Liav Caspi. But before we get going, if you have any questions during the session, please drop them in the chat, and we'll definitely save some time at the end for the Q&A portion. If I can go to the next slide, please. So why are we here today? Well, Legit Security recently made an announcement for Legit MCP Server, which was launched approximately a week and a half ago. And so Liav will be basically sharing some more insights into Legit MCP Server, what it means for AI-led development, and even show you how it works. If you can go to the next slide, please. So why did Legit Security go about in wanting to address this? Well, 360i Research, a research platform, is anticipating a rapid rise in the usage of code assistant or code editing platforms. So we're only going to be seeing an increase in potential platforms and even usage. As you can see from the numbers, 360i Research is anticipating a huge jump from 6.7 million in 2024 to go up to 25 billion by the time we reach 2030. But let's take a few little steps back. What I wanted to do was actually hand over to you, Liav. Let's start at the top. What is MCP and how does it fit in this evolving developer landscape?
Sure. Thanks, Awais. So let's go quickly about MCP very basically. I guess some of the people here know about this, so I'll try to go over it quickly. But again, feel free to write any question you have, both about what we legit has released or generally about anything relating to MCP. So new technology, it's going around for the last couple of months. So it is a model context protocol. It is a universal protocol that is meant for AI agents, so LLMs, systems that use AI, to communicate with external tools. It is a protocol that helps extend additional AI tools. And you can, when you're talking about software development, which is one of the biggest areas of where AI is now utilized, tools like Cursor, Windsurf, GitHub Copilot, this is really connecting MCP into the development process and enhancing the code assistant with additional capabilities really gives a lot of power, and we'll show some of that right today. It is basically a client-server model. There is an MCP server and MCP client. We'll get into more details. And a lot of people say fancy words about MCP, but getting more technical about what exactly this is. This is a JSON format served by a server that tells an AI system how to work with external services. So basically what the server does, that's the first step, is when you connect this to Cursor, for example, the MCP server tells Cursor, hey, there are a bunch of services that you can consume. And with a very, very standardized JSON format, it tells the service, here are the services. What the server further does is it basically translates requests that are coming from the AI agent into APIs. So it's really, if you want to really understand how it works, you have to go back and understand what you needed to do in the past to make AI agents use external services. So in the past, if you wanted your AI agent to talk to Jira, if you wanted your AI agent to talk to Slack, whether it's Claude Desktop, whether it's ChatGPT, any of those agents, you would have needed to basically extend this with a capability to use the API of the service. So some AI systems had these tools extended. You needed to write a piece of functionality, a piece of code that does the API request, and you needed to let the API how to invoke it. So AI systems could run, for example, CLI commands on the system. They could do some operation, and you needed to tell them, hey, here is an API, here is the schema, here is how you do it. Use that tool, for example, to send Slack messages. So it was very, very inconsistent. There were a lot of people writing a lot of extensions. Many AI systems build their own format for extending themselves. So Claude built some. There were any tool I put here only three, but there are numerous AI systems what I'd be calling here in this session AI agents. So what those systems have done is create some kind of a standard. Each created their way of how do you extend a system to be able to get information or do actions in a different service. When MCP came, based on Anthropic, basically what happened is that there is an MCP server. There is a very protocol. It's the same concept as API. There is a very well-defined protocol, and our AI agent can talk to the MCP server. It could be some MCP. So if you go to your extension configuration, there could be multiple agents. You could go into, for example, Legit MCP, what we have released, and our MCP starts to expose functionality. It can expose functionality into getting information or doing information on the Legit system. It exposes functionality, for example, to do further tasks, and we're increasingly adding more and more functionality as it relates to security operations. Your AI agent may talk to multiple MCP servers. It can talk to an MCP server in this example I gave here that talks to Jira. So basically, every MCP server exposes some functionality for the AI. The protocol itself is how this information is, how this service is exchanged. So let's talk about some of the building blocks of an MCP server. So you have the server, which is an endpoint and provides information about what tools are exposed. And you've got the specific item called a tool. A tool is a specific capability an AI agent can call. So when you look about the standard communication between a client and a server, basically there is an authentication process with the MCP server, same as Legit. And then the server provides the client with the list of tools. It gives the client configuration on what tools that can the server support. The MCP protocol, the MCP format, it's basically the JSON format. Now the client knows, the AI agent knows what tools it can use. Now the AI can invoke this tool with arguments. So for example, if you expose a tool, for example, show me my vulnerabilities, then it can call this tool. The configuration of the server tells the AI agent when to call, which is basically a prompt. This is an English text telling the AI system when to use that tool, in what situation is this tool helpful, and what parameters to send to this tool. There's two ways of implementing an MCP. One is locally, so the server runs locally on your desktop. It is usually a Docker container. It could be a command line that's listening to standard input. This is one way. It's been the standard way for when MCP was created. The second option is a remote MCP. It's basically an address that the client can actually talk to. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to run anything. You basically just let your client know how to access that server. You just give the configuration to the client and some authentication parameters, and then you're good to go. So I see a question about is there a catalog of MCP servers? So actually, I wanted to include this. I might just go freestyle later and show you. These things are popping up everywhere, like you see, like mushrooms after rain. There are dozens of MCP catalogs that I've seen. I haven't seen a standard one. MCP.so is one. So there are numerous MCP servers that or catalogs that you can go and see. For example, I wanted to connect my email client to ChatGPT or to Claude. I wanted to be able to ask my mail. So I looked for MCP server for mails, and I found a lot of GitHub open source project. I found various lists showing these MCP endpoints. Basically, what you need to remember, the question about denial of service. The server itself, if it's a local server, what it does is just translates AI into API calls. So if you, for example, connect your own ChatGPT, for example, to be able to read your mails, your Gmail, you will have a server, an MCP server, that basically what it does is it gets ChatGPT's query, translated into an API query into Google. It is the same as you would have done in a custom code that reaches an API. It's basically an API translator. You can think about it like this, from AI English, from prompt to a API call. to a standard REST API call. This is basically what it is. Remote MCP servers just give away the configuration. It's an endpoint for somebody to pull away the configuration and say, hey, there is this MCP server here. Here are the tools that we can use. Here is the API endpoint. So any service that exposes a remote MCP, I would bet they also expose a standard API, and it shouldn't, it might increase the load if people start using AI tools, but they're expecting that same load from API calls anyway. But yeah, this is a very, very growing industry, changing very fast. I would expect that a lot of things would change. I'll try to show some of these MCP catalogs. It'll be time. Cool. So moving a little bit further, talking about why we built an MCP server for Legit. The main use case we looked at is code generation. We looked at the fact that a code assistant, AI code assistant, whether it's any code assistant tool, and also in AI, we'll talk about AI, general AI bots, but mainly code assistants are now a standard tool in the developer stack. So it is a standardized tool. You used to have, your source code management, your IDE. So now any dev organizations right now, one of those must-have tools in the stack is which AI code assistants are you using? I don't think there is a developer on earth that's not using. There are some organizations that are thinking about, from an enterprise perspective, what they're going to use, or thinking about what are we going to sanction. But any developer right now, same as you couldn't avoid Stack Overflow in the past, an AI coding assistant is a tool that exists and is a must-have for every organization. And then we looked at this as the new area where coding happens, and we look at this today as the new area where security should happen. So we want to bring security into the generation process. We believe that when developers write code, the code assistant is the tool where it is getting trained on the full context of your application. It is getting trained on the development style and conventions and what to do and what not to do. So as it's getting more context, this is the location where this context is strategically being accumulated. So we're betting that the developer assistant is going to be the knowledge base where how you code properly is going to happen. Developers will always complement this, will always give feedback, but the code assistant is getting more and more and more power. So it is the natural place that if, for example, you need to fix a vulnerability, and this is, I think, one of the main use cases we'll show today, it makes a lot of sense just to basically get this vulnerability right down to the code assistant. So the other example that we'll use in our show is that looking at generic AI systems like Claude Desktop or even OpenAI ChatGPT, getting them access to vulnerability data, especially for application security teams, is extremely useful. Like you can basically generate reports, you can basically start carrying out operations using your own AI system, using a chat flow where you could, for example, ask for a report and then come back and say, hey, I don't like the colors. Please make the font bigger, or please just show me the top 5. Or you can start iterate and get your work done instead of just counting on what a product provides you. So we'll show these two opportunities, but basically the whole point is how do you connect our data, Legit's data, which is security and vulnerability data, and I'll show some of that into this MCP flow. I want to, before we go into showing some of the use cases, I want to actually pause here and actually like shift gears a little bit and talk about the security risks of MCP. We're a security company. As we were building this MCP functionality, we were thinking about this whole notion of MCP servers has security risks. So I want to spend just 5 minutes going over our experience building an MCP or using external MCP tools, and also our experience in seeing what other organizations are worried about. So The first piece is when you build an MCP server, um, and you're building this functionality either for internal use in your company or for external use, what's risky? So there is a couple of configuration things that we wanted to point out. One, like how do you get information from the MCP? Um, so is it a network MCP server or local? So for example, some MCP servers are supposed to run locally on your endpoint. You run them on your endpoint. Basically, they translate API calls. Nobody else can access them except people on this desktop. So it's again, it depends how you distribute them, but basically, if you are going to create an MCP server that is network based, which we called a hosted server, that's different than a local one. And it really determines how exposed it is, together with where do you listen on it. So we've seen MCP servers on endpoints that basically listen are bound to 0, 0 and are accessible from everywhere. So people become like those like walking or endpoints become these walking MCP servers that are basically a lot of the organization can connect to. Um, the the third thing is authentication, which is, I think, critical. So if an MCP server is not authenticated, you're basically opening up API calls to anyone. So we've seen things like that internally happening, or the authentication has been very weak. You have to go back to the diagram that I've showed and understand that when you launch an MCP server, again, it's basically an API proxy. It's going to run API calls based on AI agent requests. If it has if it can run those calls, and somebody has to do the authentication. There is actually in the MCP protocol, there is no, they don't go deep into the schema. I think we'll find as an industry a lot of vulnerabilities or a lot of vulnerable architectures that are going to pop up. But the things I wanted to point out is that this is something that when you threat model or when you're going to launch an MCP, you really have to make sure that it doesn't allow people that are not authorized to use this because you're basically bypassing the authentication that standard API had. So that's one of the strongest points that we've seen, and there's a lot of today insecure MCP servers ready to launch, and people can just launch them inside a company and make data available now to anyone with just the ability to connect. Um, I put your last thing about like header verification, which is mostly about making sure you verify HTTP. There's attacks that people can redirect. I'm not going to go deep into that, but there's attacks where somebody can redirect people, like innocent people that browse on a website, or AI agents that browse on a website to use an MCP server without they know. So you really need to make sure that you're checking that the request came from is validated and it's not a spoofed attack. There's basically very, very simple things to do. But I think as we move forward, we'll find more and more attacks relevant to MCP. Um, this was mostly about building an MCP, like how do you build a secure MCP? The next thing is what are some of the problems using those MCP servers? So I want to call out two risks. One is exposing code and data. So basically the AI system is given instructions what to use the MCP server. For example, when somebody's asking, let's say we put an MCP server that's opens your tickets. So you can write, hey, open the ticket, and it sends information. The AI makes a decision what information to send. It gets some instructions on what information to pick up, but AI systems are not deterministic. So basically, there is really no way of really guaranteeing what data is going to be sent exactly. Like if it's going to be exactly the name of the function, it's going to be more lines. So you need to be prepared as you're extending AI systems into MCP that receives information that you don't really have control over the boundaries of information that's going to be sent to the MCP server. You're really at the mercy of this MCP server about what information you're going to share with them. So now if you know that tool is a tool only to share these specific things, that's okay. Tools like Cursor, for example, give you an option to verify before you send a request. So they show you, here is what I'm going to send. But as you know, developers, and I'll show you in a demo, they just press enter and move forward. So there is a risk that information is going to be shared unintentionally or even maliciously with an MCP server. And again, there is no, unlike, for example, permission models that use standard APIs where you give access keys and you say like this token has access to these, you're basically, it doesn't exist. There is basically anything the AI can access can be sent to the MCP, only depends on what the server is asking for. So again, we're missing this functionality today with MCP. You need to be careful about how do you extend AI systems. The second problem is what happened when you chain those. Like you created things called like MCP pipeline. So you can have your cursor call an MCP that need to do some Slack stuff, and that MCP server behind the scenes decides to run AI that calls another MCP server that used to run AI. So basically, what can happen is that there could be pipelining of multiple tools calling each other and creating AI generated calls. So the same problem in number one is just going to be more sprawling. Now, these things are still in small scale today as people are starting to adopt those tools, but we're seeing them as a major area where we want to provide also security controls and visibility into how can you extend your AI system safely and make sure, or at least understand what's going to happen with the data that you're sending. Um, so I'll pause here. These have been two risks of using the extensions of MCP. And I want to actually go and actually talk about like how we use MCP in Legit and show you a little bit about our platform. Awais, anything to add at this point?
No, no, nothing. There was a question that did come in as well, and it was related to this topic around can MCP help detect or prevent model misuse?
Yeah. Um, can MCP help detect or prevent model misuse? Um, Let me think about it. So again, MCP um, is basically an extension. So theoretically, I think if you build, I mean, again, I never thought about this use case before, but theoretically, if you build an extension that actually like tells the model to share things or validate them, then I think there is a possibility to create some kind of a flow where the extension actually tells the AI different things and helps them better tune the answer or better make decisions. So this is extremely possible. Um, all right, so let me share my screen. So I will be going over legit security a little bit, and then um, I would show you how we use MCP to enhance that. Um,
Okay, so let's see a demo of Legit Security. Before that, let's start with what the platform does. So here is our platform. Legit Security is an ASPM tool. It aggregates, correlates, and deduplicates risk from multiple sources into a single pane of glass. So here in this platform, we've ingested findings from Sneak, from our own native scanners like Legit SCA, Black Duck, Checkmarks, JFrog X-Ray, etc. So multiple vulnerabilities are ingested. They're all being enriched with context and are getting risk scoring and attributed to the right assets and projects. Uh, Using this information and remediation, root cause analysis, etc., we'll go and try to connect this with Cursor. And here I've got a project open, Legitify, which is our open source project. I have a version that has a couple of vulnerabilities that I want to fix. And first I need to connect my Cursor to Legit MCP. So if I open my MCP setting, you can see Legit MCP is configured. The configuration is super simple. I just need to copy paste the configuration file. I'll just toggle this on and off here, show you it's loading to two tools that we have, getting details and changing status. For example, if I want to uh, say that the vulnerability is a false positive, etc. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go here to the Legitify project, and I've actually looked at a couple of, these are the vulnerabilities that the project has. So I'm looking at Legitify, I'm looking at SAST findings. You can see a couple of findings that are static analysis improper use of sensitive function. This printf function is, the call is unsafe. It needs to be fixed. So I labeled a few of them. I tagged a few of them as fixed now. I can go and tag more, but let's say I went ahead and selected this first three vulnerabilities that I want to fix. So I can go into my cursor and say, show me all vulnerabilities. I don't even have to say legit in this project, tagged as fix now. So it's going to call legit, and it's going to tell me it wants to call legit. You can see the details it's going to send, and I'm going to say, okay, you can run this. So it's running this, and you say, hey, I found three things. And it's listing these three findings here in the three ones that I'm used. The use of potentially dangerous function. This is the issue everywhere. They're a little bit different because this one is a path reversal. So there's a lot of information that's being pulled. The context here just summarized the three problems for me. You can see they match. So this vulnerability ID here, D444, correlates to either one of these. So it's actually the third one here. So this is exactly that. Everything here was now pushed into cursor. So actually right now, if I were a developer, I don't really need access to legit. I can just ask, what has my team wanted me to fix? So I can keep asking questions about those vulnerabilities and about what to do. They're high severity, but let's just generate a fix. So now I'm asking Cursor to analyze the information and build it. So I'm not using legit here, but it's actually generating code that is fixing these vulnerabilities. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and there are suggestions here. You see for how it's going to handle these changes. I can go read and talk to this, but look how fast I've been able to fix three highly high severity issues without the need to log in anywhere, just by basically pulling them into my context and creating the fix. Even my security fixes MD has been updated. So on a different topic, we could have let Cursor train on how to write secure code, and have more configuration to help it fix things. But ultimately, we use this information, we generated a fix, I can now review that, decide if I want to accept, test my code, etc. But as a developer, I got super close to fixing. Now, I just did it for three vulnerabilities. I could have just typed, get all the high and critical vulnerabilities of this project and generate a fix. So I can start playing with mass fixes on one go if I want, depending on how many vulnerabilities are there. What are the vulnerable dependencies? So the opportunities are really, really endless once you get legit as a source of information. Now, the second use case I want to show you is connecting legit with Claude. So here I've got Claude, and I've connected legit into Claude. So if I go here to my settings, you can see that in my extensions or in my developer, Legit MCP is connected. Now I'm using a local MCP, so there is a Docker container. It's running. Basically, if I click Edit Config, it'll pop up the file and basically let me just paste it. Now it's extremely simple to do it. So if you've got Legit up and running, all you need to do is basically go to the integrations, go to, for example, Claude Desktop, click Connect. You'll be redirected to the configuration page. All I need to do is basically copy paste this code here, and then just place a legit API key, which again takes a minute to take out from our setting page. So once you set it up, you place the information in the config file, and you can get a read-only API. You've got your Claude ready to go. I can go to the chat and say something like, how many critical vulnerabilities do I have in legit? And how um, how are they grouped? into types. So it is going to realize that it needs to connect with Legit. So it'll tell me, hey, I want to use this function. Do you want to allow me? I'm going to do allow always because it's going to call, it might call this a few times. There's a couple of pages here. So I'm going to let it do this multiple times. But then once it figures out what to do, we'll wait a couple of minutes and it'll basically create a report for me. This is a very, very simple use. And whenever the information is going to be spit out, I'm going to see, you can see here exactly what parameters are being set and what is being sent. So here I've got 47 critical vulnerabilities. There's one dependency. It's actually telling me here 94% of them are vulnerabilities, and here are the CVEs, etc. I could further say, can you create a report with a pie chart showing vulnerability distribution by type? And again, I've ignored here what it did, but now it's got all this information. It's going to create this, it's building up now a report with some kind of CSS. And in a minute, I'm going to have a nice pie chart that basically distributes this information. Again, playing with this tool for another minute, I might build a nice report that I need to use for a slide. I can change the colors. So again, in a very, very low effort, I can go and extract any information I want, dive deeper into that, and format it any way I want. And here we go. We got a critical vulnerability report, 94% dependency related, 4 vulnerability types, container scanning, vulnerable asset, etc. Again, it's not bad for a first shot. And then all of them have a risk score of 100 in our platform. Again, this is a very basic use case. I've just used it out of the gate, but ultimately, once you connect this information into your AI system, AI engines, the opportunities are limitless.
So I will open up a different use case. Just a second. Sorry about that. What I want to basically present is basically my Claude desktop. I'm not gonna actually don't want to get. I'm not gonna take some changes right now, although it works. In my environment, I just want to show you really quickly things that you can do. So for example, I can go to my Claude desktop and say, hey, I would like a pie chart showing the number of issues detected, broken down by severity. So this is something you can basically start running. Again, Claude is going to generate an HTML file. It's going to be web-based. This video takes 45 seconds. If I skip forward, I ended up by getting a report. This is something now that, from a security perspective, this is a very, very fast report. You can get this report and basically start communicating. So what I was doing prior with my Claude desktop is saying, I like this dark mode. I will also want a graph of my critical vulnerabilities over the last month. Now, again, this information is exposed by our Get Details API, the MCP exposed. So basically, there is the ability to go extend your Claude system and show whatever report you want to create and export it, ask it to create a PDF for you. So the options are almost endless on the ability to drive things. You just need to create this and start playing around, extracting data, basically have English access to the API that shows everything about your application. So the other things I didn't show you, but again, one of the MCP tools that we are exposing is the one that is responsible for fixing. So basically, one of the use cases we're heavily doing right now is in VS Code. We're like helping user generate fix or telling VS Code, hey, can you just mark this as false positive? And it will reach out to update details and mark things as false positive. So a triage session by a developer, pulling out all the information that is known about vulnerabilities, going over them, generating a fix, could take, you could single out something like 20 minutes of work, knock down dozens of vulnerabilities in one session with our extension of VS Code. I think with that, we're getting close to the end. Awais, is there any other questions coming in?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Liav, for that. Just a couple of more general questions, and that have come in. So the first is, how important is it for developers to understand the risk and kind of mitigation piece when using these sort of code assistant platforms, and especially these developers, if they're not coming from a security background. Could you share some insights on that?
Um, so can you rephrase it like how important it is for developers?
Yes, yeah, to understand the risk and I would say risk mitigation when
Okay.
using these sort of platforms, and of course the role that MCP kind of plays within that in the broader sense.
Yeah. So I would say we're going into the age of secure by design that is really possible. We're like we're really used to, I don't know if it answers the question, but we're really used to a situation where um, you get a lot of vulnerabilities that are detected out of band because nobody wants to create interruptions. Massive piles of vulnerabilities are piled up somewhere, and people invest a lot of time trying to find those little vulnerabilities that are really important. We invested a lot in prioritization, exploitability analysis, and then try to also invest a lot of time understanding what is the solution. How do we fix that? Is it going to break my code? Is it going to be a breaking change? Um, am I operationally protected because I got a compensating control? So there's a lot of effort that's been spent. I think AI turns everything on its head and basically say, you don't need to worry about this. There is a way to do en masse, like really masses of vulnerabilities. Get those vulnerabilities, basically just understand quickly, is this vulnerability important? Is this vulnerability not important? What is the real fix, the low-hanging fruit? And basically just drive this directly to developers into into the ID or to this cursor copilot context where it basically can fix that. So instead of thinking about what one vulnerability can I do, basically think about how can you use AI agents and this ability basically just to automate all that process. Let your AI agent knock out all the low-hanging fruits, let it do the work and at scale, and let the developer really experience firsthand what's going on instead of so many mediators. And I hope it answers the question, but I think this is where all the security findings are going, like reduction of those mediators and doing things at scale.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So have got another question that's coming. It's a long question, so bear with me. So is legit security limited to protecting AI generated code and MCP environments,
Mhm.
or is it extensible? Is it extensible enough to work alongside other application security tools like CodeQL or Cycode for comprehensive code analysis and policy enforcement?
Yeah, so we are doing, we're not limited to AI generated code. So Legit traditionally, as an ASPM, has been doing code security like CodeQL, like Cycode, being able to scan code for secrets, for vulnerabilities, for open source risks. We're actually, as a platform, hybrid in a sense of we can pull in vulnerabilities from third parties. We can also find these vulnerabilities ourselves, and we create this unified risk single pane of glass where we correlate and deduplicate. So sometimes, Dependabot CodeQL or something that's part of the stack, but it doesn't do really well on other types of code scanning that we can complement. So basically, like we are securing traditional code. I think the AI generated portion is basically, I know shift left is a bad word, but it's like an extreme shift left. It's basically just take all of that and try to bring it as close as to the developer as possible and try to use as much AI as possible to facilitate the fixing of that.
Okay. I think that's all that we have for on the questions.
Cool.
To the audience, obviously, if there are any additional questions as well, you can feel free to actually send us an email at info@legitsecurity.com, and obviously we can get back to you after the webinar as well. But yeah, no, thank you very much, Liav. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. And just we wanted to let everybody know that we'll be sending an email with a recording for this webinar in the next few hours. If you enjoyed today's webinar and obviously want more information on MCP, on legit security in general, or just have any other unanswered questions, as I mentioned, please drop us a line at info@legitsecurity.com. And finally, just want to say a big thank you to you, our audience. And until next time, have a great rest of the day. Thanks again, Liav, as well.